After that day at Franklin's, everything seemed to have returned to normal. No one said anything. There were no messages with ulterior motives, no deep conversations about what we had experienced. Just that comfortable, or perhaps uncomfortable, silence of someone who has decided to move on without complicating things. A few days passed. I went back to my college routine, trying to concentrate on my studies and get my head on straight. But every now and then, the memories came back, flashes of that day, the touches, the looks, and above all, what was left in the air. On Friday afternoon, I decided to go to the barber shop. My hair was already screaming for help, and deep down, I wanted to see Franklin. When I walked in, the receptionist greeted me with a complicit smile, as if she knew more than she was saying. Franklin was finishing a cut for a client, and as soon as he saw me in the mirror, he smiled. A discreet but sincere smile, the kind that warms the chest. When he'd finished, he wiped down his chair and beckoned me over with a gesture of his chin. I sat down and he put the cape on, with the care that only he had. "Hey, missing," he said, his voice low, almost intimate. "College rush," I replied, trying to sound calm. As I cut my hair, the conversation flowed lightly. We talked about music, about the heat, about the test I had to take on Saturday morning. When he'd finished, he leaned over slightly, resting his hands on the arms of the chair and looking at me closely. "I was thinking of going out today. A quiet bar, have a beer, listen to some music. Would you like that?" I smiled. "I'm up for it. But I can't stay long. I have an early test tomorrow." He nodded with a smile at the corner of his mouth. "I promise to get you ready for tomorrow." I left the barber shop with a chill in my stomach. It was just a bar, just a chance encounter, but something told me that this night was going to move me in a different way. At the agreed time, my cell phone vibrated. It was a call from Franklin. "I'm waiting for you downstairs," he said, his voice deep and calm. "I'll be right down," I replied, grabbing my wallet and keys before heading out. I got into the car and he smiled slightly, as if this was a simple but special moment. We went straight to the bar, a discreet place with low lighting, wooden tables, and a good playlist playing in the background. We had a few beers, some snacks, and chatted about light things. College, music, some funny stories from the barbershop. The atmosphere was pleasant, relaxed, with no pressure. At times, our gazes met in a lingering way, as if words were too small for what we couldn't explain. But we didn't touch on anything that had happened with Robert. It was as if the subject had been locked away in a drawer that neither of us wanted to open. After a while, we decided to leave. The conversation had been good, the company even better. On the way back, the silence was comfortable, and the city lights flashed through the car window like reflections of something we still didn't know if we wanted to feel again or leave behind. When he stopped in front of my building, I looked at him and, without thinking too much, asked, "Do you want to go upstairs?" He looked at me for a second, as if he was measuring something, and then smiled slightly. "I do." We went upstairs. The door had barely closed and we were already kissing. It was quick, urgent, but full of restrained desire. We made love right there, without much talking, as if time was short and our bodies knew exactly what they wanted. There were no games, no poses, just skin, accelerated breathing, and that connection that was still there, even after everything. When we finished, he got dressed in silence. He gave me a quiet kiss, a little longer, and left. I stood there in the doorway, listening to the sound of the elevator going down. And for the first time since it all began, I felt a slight emptiness in my chest. About 3 days later, while I was still in class, my cell phone vibrated in my pocket. I glanced at it discreetly and saw that it was a message from Franklin. "Hey, gorgeous, how are you? Robert asked me for your number. Can I pass it on?" I read the message, but it was at an important moment in class. The teacher was explaining some heavy content, and I didn't want to get distracted. I took a deep breath, put my cell phone in my pocket, and left it for later. I only picked up my phone again on the way home. It was a muggy day. My headphones were playing some random playlist, and my thoughts were on the message. When I finally answered, I tried to sound casual. "Hey, Franklin, how are you?" "Yes, you can pass." "But, do you know what he wants my number for?" The answer came almost immediately, as if he was waiting for me to say something. He didn't say, but I think he's going to ask you out. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, without reaction. It was as if I already knew, but still, reading it made something stir inside me. My finger remained still on the keyboard, undecided, and in the end I just sent, "Okay." Simple, dry, almost indifferent. But inside, it wasn't quite like that. I put my cell phone back in my pocket and kept walking, feeling that okay echoing more than I would have liked. I got home tired, took a quick shower, and had something to eat. My head was already heavy with so much to think about, not just Franklin and Robert, but also the accumulated subjects. College wasn't easy, and my father made it clear that I couldn't falter. He paid for everything. He expected results, and any bad grade became a charge on the spot. I sat at my desk with my books open, trying to focus. The content was difficult. Each line seemed more confusing than the next, but I had to do well in those tests. I was determined. But in the middle of my notes, my cell phone vibrated. I looked at the screen, and there it was. "Hey, Alan, how are you? This is Robert." I answered almost automatically, as if my body responded before my mind reacted. "Hi, Robert. I'm fine. How are you? What do you say?" He answered straight away, as if he was ready there, waiting for my attention. "I'm fine too. I wanted to call you so we could do something at the weekend. What do you think?" I read the message and stared at the screen for a few seconds. I thought quickly and typed, "Fine with me. Has Franklin agreed?" But the reply took me by surprise. "I was thinking of going just the two of us. Is that okay with you?" For a few seconds I hesitated. I felt something tighten inside my chest. It wasn't jealousy. At least that's what I told myself. It was just strange. But I kept my answer neutral. "That's fine with me." He then finished, "Okay then. We'll talk, and then we'll arrange things. Cheers." I just typed, "Hug." I locked the screen and left my cell phone face down on the table. I tried to get back to the content of the lesson, but my head was no longer in the same place. The image of Robert, the invitation, Franklin's absence, it all kept hammering away at me, like a silent hum that I couldn't ignore. But as soon as I put my cell phone away, that nagging, almost automatic thought came to me. Won't Franklin be upset? I stared at nothing for a few seconds, pencil still in my fingers. The image of him popped into my head, the slight smile, the calm manner, the firm touch of his hands. And, along with all this, the memory of that phrase he himself had said at the barbecue, so naturally, "You're very beautiful, but if you're up for it, I won't deprive you. We've only just met, and that's fine." I took a deep breath. He himself said it was fine, I thought, trying to shake off the guilt that was beginning to grow for no apparent reason. So why does it still bother me? Maybe it was because, even though everything seemed open and free, deep down I still didn't really know what we were, or weren't, about. Was it just sex? Was it just fun? Or was I already confusing things? I shook my head, trying to refocus. The weekend was still a while away. And until then, I had to get through the exam, one step at a time. But even as I immersed myself in the books, the doubt remained. Silent, insistent, blowing around in the back of my mind. Is everything really going so well? The weekend came quicker than I expected. It had been a busy week, full of studies, exams, and too many loose thoughts to organize. Even so, when I woke up on Saturday, my body knew that the day was going to be different, and it was as if, deep down, I was still trying to understand why. In the middle of the afternoon, my cell phone rang. It was Robert. "What's up, Alan? Everything all right?" "Everything's fine. And you?" I replied, trying to look calm, even though my heart was beating a little faster. "I'm fine too. I thought we'd go out later. Can I pick you up at 8? "Yes, you can," I said. "Where are we going?" "Surprise," he replied with a light laugh. "I want to take you somewhere I like. I think you'll like it." I hung up the phone with a slight knot in my stomach. It wasn't anxiety. Or maybe it was. But it was different from what I felt with Franklin. With Robert, everything seemed more uncertain. He was handsome, charming, secure, but he was also more closed off. Hard to read. I wondered what kind of place it would be. A bar? A restaurant? Something more daring? The truth is that, until that moment, I still didn't know exactly what to expect from him, or from myself. I got up, went to the shower, put on a nice outfit, but nothing over the top. While applying perfume, I looked in the mirror and asked myself quietly, "Why are you nervous?" I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that on that Saturday night, something was going to change, even if it was only on the inside. At 8 o'clock sharp, he stopped the car in front of my building. I got out and got into the car. Robert greeted me with a quick, almost restrained smile, and without saying much, we started driving around the city. "So, where are we going?" I asked, trying to break the silence inside the vehicle. He continued to drive in silence for a few minutes, and then, in a calm voice, he said, "You'll see. Whenever I want a bit of peace, I go there. It brings me peace, renews my energy. I've never taken anyone there. Hardly anyone goes." I watched the street go by, intrigued and curious. The atmosphere inside the car was charged with a subtle tension, as if his every word opened up a part of me that rarely comes out. At that moment, I couldn't hold back the question, "Why are you taking me?" As we drove, Robert put his hand on my thigh with unexpected delicacy, but firmly enough to remind me that it was real. He looked down at me and said, "Because you're a nice guy, and I want to share that with you." The touch, simple and sincere, left me momentarily unresponsive. His words seemed to carry not only the intention of sharing that peaceful space, but also a silent invitation to something deeper, something that went beyond what I had expected for the evening. The car headed towards an unknown destination, and the city seemed to transform through the window, changing from busy streets to quieter avenues. With each kilometer, anticipation mixed with a slight discomfort, as I tried to understand whether I was really prepared to share this intimate moment with Robert. The city began to recede into the background. The lights, the buildings, the sound of the cars, everything gradually disappeared in the rear-view mirror. We left the asphalt and entered a narrow cobbled street surrounded by trees. It was a very steep climb, with sharp bends and stretches so narrow that it was scary to even look to the side. The car climbed with effort, and the silence inside only added to the sense of mystery. It wasn't long before he parked the car in a dirt parking space next to a concrete wall. I looked out of the window and saw nothing. Only darkness. A pitch blackness that seemed to swallow up everything around it. "Here?" I asked, surprised. "But I don't see anything." Robert smiled, pointing discreetly. "Look that way." I turned my face in the direction indicated, and then, suddenly, there it was, the whole city below, lit up like a carpet of stars spread out on the ground. It was breathtaking. We got out of the car, and the cool wind from the altitude touched my face. I stood still for a few seconds, just staring. The view was beautiful, intense, and, somehow, it really brought a peace that I didn't know I needed. There were no other people around, just two very weak lampposts and a few concrete benches along the wall. We sat side by side in silence. Only the sound of the wind and the glow of the city lights filled the space between us. After a while he stood up, patted my leg lightly and said, "Wait a minute." He went to his car, opened the trunk, and came back with 2 beers in his hands. He handed me one and kept the other. I opened the bottle, took a sip, and let the cold liquid run down my throat. We stood there, side by side, drinking in silence, as if that were enough, as if any words were too few in the face of that sight. Suddenly, I felt him come closer. His leg touched mine, his shoulder brushed mine. Then, without saying a word, he turned his face and kissed me. But it wasn't just any kiss. It was a kiss with desire, with intent, a slow, deep, hot kiss. The kind of kiss you don't give for the sake of giving it, you give it because you feel it. I was surprised. Until then, I had known a Robert who was more direct, more physical, less giving. But here he was, tender, gentle. It was a side of him I hadn't seen before. After the kiss, He pulled me in slowly, slipped his arm behind my shoulder, and pulled me against his chest. I stayed there, glued to his body, listening to his heartbeat. I felt the warmth of his skin, the smell of beer mixed with his perfume, and his calm, steady breathing. I was loving it. It wasn't just the place, the feeling of being welcomed, of being safe, without having to pretend anything. It was a new kind of feeling for me. A kind of calm that didn't come from the view, but from the embrace. And, for the first time that night, I wanted to stay there. Just there. For longer than I expected. We stood there for a while, holding each other in silence, as if time had slowed down just for the two of us. The city below continued to shine, indifferent to what was happening up there. The wind blew lightly, and I felt welcomed in a way I couldn't explain. After a while, he pulled away slightly, looked into my eyes, and asked calmly, "Do you want to see my house?" I was surprised. I hadn't expected that invitation, especially coming from him. I felt something warm up inside me. Of course I would. I'd love to. We got back in the car and drove down the road. The drive back was quiet, but peaceful. Robert drove with a rare serenity, and the city gradually came into view again, as if everything was falling into place. It wasn't long before we arrived. His house was beautiful, modern, spacious, with a well-kept garden in front and large glass windows. One of those places that seems to have been thought out down to the last detail. At the same time, there was a certain silence inside, an emptiness that wasn't physical, but emotional, a discreet but present absence. "Wow," I commented as I entered. "This house is huge. Have you always lived here alone?" He turned slowly, walking to the center of the room. He looked at me with a slight smile and replied, "No, I used to live with my wife. She died 7 years ago. Since then, I've lived alone." I felt a tightness in my chest. "I'm sorry about your wife," I said sincerely, still digesting the information. Robert nodded, looking calm. "It's all right. She was an incredible woman. She was the great love of my life. But it's been a long time. I think she's in a better place." He paused briefly, like someone revisiting old, delicate memories. Then he continued, "A few years after she passed away, I met Franklin. We went out a few times, tried something, but we didn't have much in common. We became friends. And after that, I just didn't want to meet anyone else." He approached me, his eyes fixed on mine. His tone of voice softened even more, as if he were confessing something he'd been holding back for a long time. "And then you came along, and awakened that feeling in me all over again." At that moment, my heart raced. And the words just wouldn't come. I could only hold his gaze for a few seconds, feeling the weight and the beauty of what he was saying. It was too much, too deep, too true. And I still didn't know what to do with it all. We went into the kitchen, and he began to prepare dinner with a lightness that surprised me. He cut the ingredients with precision, and stirred the pots like he'd done it 1,000 times before. The house was filled with a delicious smell, and the atmosphere between us became even more delicious. Over dinner, we talked about our lives, childhood, family, funny stories from our teenage years. We laughed, toasted with wine, and for a few hours, everything seemed light, natural, as if we had been together for a long time, even though it was so recent. After another glass of wine, he looked at me with that calm, intense gaze and said, "Why don't you sleep with me tonight? I'd love your company." I answered without thinking. It was automatic, from the bottom of my heart. "Of course. I'd love to sleep with you too." He smiled and took me to see the rest of the house. He showed me around calmly, as if opening up that space was also opening up a piece of his own history. Then we went back to the living room and sat on the sofa, watching a comedy movie. We laughed at silly scenes, but it felt good. It was easy to be there. It was good. A while later, when the movie was over, he took me by the hand and we went to the bedroom. And then, the magic happened. We made love like I'd never done before. Of course, I still didn't have much experience, but it wasn't just sex. It was surrender. It was desire. It was affection, desire, connection. His touches weren't just physical, they spoke to my skin as if they knew exactly where to touch me to make me shiver. His kisses were warm, but also full of care. He guided me, enveloped me, made me feel wanted. And for the first time, I felt that it wasn't just pleasure, it was feeling. That beautiful beard rubbing against my neck, his muscular body pressing against mine, his eyes looking at me in a way that seemed to undress me from the inside. It was surreal. We had chemistry, a lot of it. My body reacted to his as if we already knew each other. I shivered at his touches, my skin crawled with every kiss, and the world outside disappeared. There was just the two of us, and a new, intense sensation that I still didn't know how to name, but which was certainly far beyond the physical. When it was all over, we lay side by side, still panting. The room was silent, lit only by the soft light coming in through the window. My body was still warm, my heart was racing, and my breathing was trying to get back into rhythm. Robert turned slightly, entwined his fingers in mine, and held my hand firmly but affectionately. It was in that simple gesture, in that sincere touch, that something inside me revealed itself with a force I hadn't expected. At that moment, I knew for sure. I was in love with him. It wasn't just desire, or neediness, or curiosity. It was love, a calm, deep feeling, but at the same time so intense that it almost frightened me. I had no idea that it would be possible to feel that so soon, so suddenly, but it was there, clear as the city lights shining outside. And I didn't want him as an object of pleasure. I wanted him for myself, as a partner, as someone to share the day, the bed, the conversations, and the silences, someone to build memories with. I wanted him forever. And there, lying next to that man who until recently was just a distant desire, I understood. I was ready to love and to be loved, even if I didn't know if he felt the same way, even without knowing what would come next. I closed my eyes, still holding his hand, and let my heart speak louder. I wanted to extend this story further, to go deeper into this feeling that was born in me, but I can't right now. I'll be back soon to continue. So you already know. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like, because I have something important to say about Franklin when I get back. And, of course, the uncut version is there in the comments. Until next time.